You know what nobody tells you about witnessing greatness? It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or spotlights. Sometimes it happens in a millisecond, a single decision that changes everything you thought you knew about control, about talent, about what one human being is capable of when the world tries to box them in. My name is Marcus Webb. In 1988, I was a 24-year-old stage tech for the Bad World Tour. Nobody important. I pushed cables, taped down marks, made sure the pyro guys didn't blow us all to kingdom come. But on July 16, 1988, at Wembley Stadium, in front of 80,000 screaming fans, I watched Michael Jackson do something so insane, so impossibly bold, that 36 years later, my hands still shake when I tell this story. He fired his entire band, mid-concert. And what happened in the next 4 minutes didn't just shock those 80,000 people in the stadium. It changed the way I understood what a human being could do when genius stops asking for permission and just takes over. Before the Empire, 2300 Jackson Street. But to understand that night, you've got to go back with me, way back, to a place where Michael Jackson wasn't Michael Jackson yet. 2300 Jackson Street, Gary, Indiana. I know everyone talks about this address like it's some sacred site now, but in 1964, it was just a tiny 2-bedroom house in a neighborhood where the air tasted like rust from the steel mills, and every family was one missed paycheck from catastrophe. Now, I wasn't there, I was born in '64, but I heard this story so many times from Gloria Richardson, a retired elementary school music teacher who lived 3 doors down from the Jacksons. She passed away in 2019, but before she did, she told me something I'll never forget. It was a Wednesday afternoon, late summer, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt soft and the air thick enough to chew. Gloria was walking home from Robinson Elementary with a bag of groceries when she heard it, this sound coming from the Jackson house. She said it stopped her dead on the sidewalk. At first, I thought someone left a radio on, she told me, her eyes getting distant, like she was back there. But radios don't sound like that. She walked closer. The front window was open, had to be because there was no air conditioning, and that house was like an oven in summer. Through the window, she could see into what passed for their rehearsal space. Windowless, cramped, the carpet was this burnt orange color, worn down to the backing in spots from all those feet. 8 kids in that house, plus Joe Jackson, drilling them hour after hour. And there, in the center of that small space, barefoot on that worn carpet, was Michael. 6 years old, maybe 65 pounds soaking wet. He looked tiny, like a strong wind could snap him in half. He had these enormous eyes, and he was looking up at his father with this expression that made my heart hurt. He looked terrified, vulnerable, like a little bird that fell out of the nest too soon. Joe Jackson stood over him, arms crossed, with that look he had, the one that said he'd seen every con, every excuse, every half attempt in the book, and he wasn't buying any of it. Again, Joe said, just that one word. The other brothers were there too, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, all watching, waiting to see if little Michael would crack. Chapter 2. When Genius Stopped Asking Permission. Gloria Richardson told me she almost walked away. She felt like she was intruding on something private, maybe something painful. She admitted, I thought, is this child abuse? Should I report it? He looked so small, so fragile. But then Michael opened his mouth. What came out wasn't a child's voice. It was presence. It was power. It was something that had no business coming from a body that small. He was singing Tobacco Road, that old blues number about growing up poor and desperate, and Gloria said it was like watching someone become possessed. His feet, I remember his feet, she said, bare on that worn carpet. They started moving, and it wasn't like he was learning to dance. It was like he was teaching the floor what rhythm was. The fear in his eyes? Gone, replaced by something she'd never seen in a child before. Focus. Absolute, terrifying focus. Joe Jackson's arms slowly uncrossed. The other brothers stopped fidgeting. Even through the window, even with the sound of cicadas and distant car horns and the whole neighborhood's noise, Gloria said you could feel the air change, like the atmospheric pressure dropped, like reality bent just slightly. It lasted maybe 90 seconds, she told me. But I swear to God, Marcus, time moved different during those 90 seconds. It was like watching a door open you didn't know existed, and on the other side was something enormous. When Michael finished, there was silence in that room. Joe Jackson, the man who demanded perfection, who never gave compliments, who drove those boys like they were already late for their own destiny, just stared. Then he nodded once, slowly. "Again," he said. But this time his voice was different, quieter, not softer exactly, but respectful. This is what they call a rapid, involuntary education. Joe Jackson expected to teach his son. Instead, his son taught him that genius doesn't wait for permission. Genius doesn't apologize for taking space. Genius just is, and everyone else has to adjust. Chapter 3. Fast Forward. Wembley Stadium, 24 years later. Gloria Richardson's 90-second moment at 2300 Jackson Street created ripple effects she never could have imagined. By 1988, that tiny boy with the bare feet had become the biggest entertainer on planet Earth. The Bad World Tour was breaking every record in the book. 123 shows, 4.4 million fans. I was part of the crew that made it happen, one of 40 stage techs who worked in organized chaos to pull off what was, at that time, the most technologically complex tour ever attempted. July 16, 1988, Wembley Stadium, second night. I'd been doing this for 9 months by then, so I knew the show by heart. I knew every lighting cue, every pyroblast, every costume change down to the second. But on that night felt different from the moment I walked into the venue. The energy was off. I was backstage around 6 p.m. doing my usual pre-show checks when I saw Michael's band, some of the best session musicians in the world, huddled together near the equipment cases. They looked tense, confused. Karen Fay, Michael's makeup artist, and one of the few people he truly trusted, rushed past me with this look like someone had told her the building was on fire. "Is everything okay?" I asked. She stopped, turned, looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Define okay," she said, and disappeared into Michael's dressing room. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point, 1100 to 1530. When control becomes a cage. Here's what I didn't know then, but pieced together later from conversations with people who were in that dressing room. Michael Jackson was suffocating. Not literally, but mentally, creatively, spiritually, he was being crushed by his own perfection. The Bad Tour was flawless, too flawless. Every night, the same set list, the same moves, the same everything. For an artist whose entire identity was built on spontaneity, innovation, breaking rules, it was like putting a wolf in a zoo. And that night, something in him snapped. "I want to do something different," he told his musical director. "Michael, we have 80,000 people out there expecting—" "I know what they're expecting," Michael interrupted. "That's the problem." The band was called in. Emergency meeting, 90 minutes before the biggest show of the week. Michael wanted to change the set list, add an improvised section, let the music breathe, evolve, become something that hadn't been rehearsed to death. The musicians pushed back, not because they couldn't do it, these were world-class players, but because it was logistically insane. The lighting cues were programmed, the pyro was sequenced, the video screens were synced. You can't just improvise on a tour this big. There are too many moving parts, too many people depending on precision. Michael listened to all the reasons why it couldn't work. Then he said 5 words that changed everything. "Then I'll do it alone." Chapter 5. The Decision. 1530 to 2000. 80,000 people holding their breath. I was standing stage left when the show started, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. Michael's energy was different, sharper, more dangerous. He moved through "Wanna Be Startin' Something" and "Things I Do For You" like a caged animal testing the bars. The performances were perfect, technically flawless, but there was this charge in the air, like right before lightning strikes. Then came human nature. Usually, this was where the show settled into a groove, a gentler moment, the crowd swaying, lighters in the air. But Michael stopped singing after the first verse. Just stopped. The band kept playing for a few bars, then realized something was wrong and trailed off into confused silence. 80,000 people went dead quiet. You could hear the wind whistling through the stadium scaffolding. Michael walked to the edge of the stage, looked out at that ocean of faces, and then turned back to his band. "Thank you," he said into the microphone. "You can take a break now." The bass player, the guitarists, the keyboardists, they all looked at each other like, is this part of the show? Michael just stood there, waiting. And slowly, one by one, they put down their instruments and walked off stage. I was frozen. Everyone backstage was frozen. This wasn't planned. This wasn't rehearsed. This was Michael Jackson in front of 80,000 people, firing his entire band mid-concert. The crowd started murmuring, confused, concerned. Some people booed. And Michael just stood there, alone, in a spotlight with a wireless microphone in his hand. Then he started to sing. Chapter 6. The Performance. 2000 to 2500. What happens when genius takes permission? No instruments, no backing vocals, no safety net. Just his voice. He sang "She's Out of My Life," but not like the album version, not like any version anyone had ever heard. He deconstructed it, rebuilt it, turned it into something raw and aching and alive in a way that studio recordings can never capture. His voice cracked in places, intentionally, beautifully. He held notes that seemed to bend the laws of physics, and he moved. Those feet that Gloria Richardson had seen on the worn carpet in Gary, Indiana, now commanded a stage the size of a football field. Every step was deliberate. Every gesture told a story. The 80,000 people who'd been confused, who'd booed, who'd paid to see the greatest show on earth, and instead got their superstar firing his band, were silent. Not the restless silence of confusion, the reverent silence of people witnessing something they'd never see again. I was standing stage left, maybe 30 feet away, and I swear to God I forgot to breathe for 4 minutes straight, because I was watching the same thing Gloria Richardson saw through that window in 1964. The moment when genius stops asking for permission and just is. When the song ended, there was a beat of absolute silence. Then Wembley Stadium erupted. 80,000 people on their feet, screaming, crying, cameras flashing like a lightning storm. Michael stood there breathing hard, sweat running down his face, and he smiled. Not the practiced, camera-ready smile everyone knew. A real smile, relieved, liberated. The band came back on. The show continued. They played Billie Jean and Thriller and all the hits everyone came to see, but it didn't matter. That 4-minute solo performance was all anyone could talk about. That was the moment that made the front page of every newspaper. That was the moment that defined the entire tour. Because Michael Jackson had reminded 80,000 people and reminded himself that he wasn't a machine. He wasn't a product. He was an artist. And artists need to create, not just recreate. Chapter 7. The Ripple Effect. 2500 to 2830. 30 years of permission. So why am I telling you this story? Why does it matter what some stage tech saw 36 years ago? Because Gloria Richardson's 90 seconds at 2300 Jackson Street and my 4 minutes at Wembley Stadium taught me the same lesson. Genius doesn't wait for permission. Gloria watched a 6-year-old boy take over a room with nothing but his voice and his bare feet on worn carpet. I watched a 30-year-old man take over a stadium with nothing but courage and conviction. Both times, the authority figures expected failure. Joe Jackson expected his son to crack under pressure. The music industry expected Michael Jackson to follow the script, stay in the box, be the product they'd created. Both times they got a rapid, involuntary education. After Wembley, something changed in me. I stopped being afraid of my own ideas. I stopped waiting for someone to give me permission to try something new, to take a risk, to trust my instincts. 3 years later, I started my own production company. No connections, no investors, just the belief that if Michael Jackson could fire his entire band in front of 80,000 people and trust himself to make magic out of thin air, then maybe I could trust myself too. 30 years later, my company has worked on some of the biggest tours in the world. We've employed hundreds of people. We've created moments that millions of people remember. And it all traces back to those 4 minutes at Wembley Stadium. That's the ripple effect. One moment of courage, one decision to stop asking for permission, one choice to trust that genius knows what it's doing, even when everyone else thinks you're insane.
Chapter 8. The Moral. 2830 to 30. The door that's always open. Gloria Richardson died in 2019, but before she did, I flew to Gary, Indiana to interview her for a documentary I was producing. We sat in her living room, the same house she'd lived in for 55 years, just 3 doors down from 2300 Jackson Street. I asked her if she ever talked to Michael about that day, about what she saw through the window. She shook her head. "Didn't need to," she said. "He was 6 years old. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't perform for me. He performed because that's what he was. Genius doesn't need an audience. It just needs permission to exist." Then she leaned forward and grabbed my hand. "You know what I learned that day, Marcus? Genius doesn't wait for the right moment. It doesn't wait for the perfect circumstances. It doesn't wait for someone to say, 'Okay, now you can be brilliant.' It just happens, in a cramped room with worn carpet, in front of 80,000 people who paid to see something else, in the grocery store, in the middle of the night, whenever it's ready. And the only question is, will you give yourself permission to let it out, or will you spend your whole life waiting for someone else to tell you it's okay?" I think about that all the time now. Every time I'm scared to try something new, every time I'm tempted to play it safe, every time I catch myself waiting for permission that's never going to come. I think about a 6-year-old boy with bare feet on worn carpet. I think about a 30-year-old man standing alone on a stage the size of a football field. And I remember, genius doesn't wait for permission. It just is. And the door is always open. All you have to do is walk through. If this story changed how you think about taking risks, about trusting your instincts, about giving yourself permission to be brilliant, hit that like button and subscribe. I've got more untold Michael Jackson stories that will blow your mind. Stories that prove greatness isn't born, it's chosen again and again and again.